And welcome to the April 26th meeting of the Fitchburg City Council as a whole committee. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast, and I would ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating your name and city of residence.
Finish in the flag.
Seeing none,
Mr. Chair, if we don't say the flag, salute to the flag first.
afterwards.
Oh, after. Oh, there's something new.
No, same order as usual.
Oh,
At this time, I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. And since I see the presenters setting up at the podium, I should note public comment will come prior to the presentation. And I will lead us in the salute to the flag.
oh,
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
President Zarella.
Here.
Councilor Boschman.
here.
Councilor Kuchar.
Here.
Councilor Cragen. Here. Councilor Cruz. Councilor Di Natale.
Here.
Councilor Fleming.
Here.
Councilor Green. Councilor Schultz. Councilor Squalia.
Present.
And Councilor Van Hassinger.
Here.
So we have 9. We have 10 members present because Mr. Derek Cruz just walked in.
No problem. All right, so 10 members present. No,
Maybe
9.
9 members
9
present.
members present.
Sorry. All right, public forum. The public had been advised to contact the city clerk's office regarding comments of no more than 2 minutes. Any that were brought to our attention in digital format will be on file with the clerk's office. We also have 4 people attending on Zoom. I see that 3 of them are people I've been advised will be presenting expert opinion during the debate. There is 1 additional. Mr. Fisher, are you here for public comment?
I am. It's Dr. Fisher.
Hello?
Yes, it's Dr. Fisher.
Dr. Fisher, thank you. I apologize. You just are showing up as John Fisher on my screen, so I apologize for that.
Right.
You may speak on any item on the agenda the only item on the agenda for not more than 2 minutes.
Is it starting now?
Yes, go ahead.
Right. Well, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm Dr. John Fisher. I have a general dental practice in Salem, Massachusetts. I graduated from Temple University School of Dentistry, and I taught there and subsequently at Boston University School of Dentistry. I currently lecture on optimal community water fluoridation, and I serve as a resource for the Massachusetts Office of Oral Health on the value and efficacy of optimal community water fluoridation. If you were worried about the health effects of fluoride, I'm here to tell you that there are no current, credible, peer-reviewed scientific studies that support any adverse health effects at an optimal level of fluoride in the water. On November 23, 2016, the Fluoride Action Network and a few other organizations filed a petition with the EPA to prohibit the addition of fluoride to U.S. water supplies under the Toxic Substances Control Act. The EPA studied the petition, and on February 27, 2017, the EPA published a response in the Federal Register denying the petition and detailing the reasons why, and citing the data they provided as scientifically insufficient. There have been court challenges to optimal community water fluoridation, and a case to have fluoride taken out of a community water supply has never been won in a court of last resort, because they have been unable to prove that fluoride causes any adverse health effects or infringes any constitutional rights. My time is limited, so I am unable to refute all the misinformation about community water fluoridation, but I would like to refer you to 2 websites with factual information. The first is ilikemyteeth.org, ilikemyteeth.org, which is sponsored by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the second is AmericanFluoridationsociety.org. If you go to quackwatch.org, you will find that many of the organizations that oppose fluoridation are not that credible. If you have any specific questions which you might want to ask, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher.
Mr. Chair, one question for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My question is, can you stay on and we can ask some questions after?
If it is the wish of the council and if he has sufficient, and if the council is satisfied with his qualifications, there is no reason the council can't ask questions of any person they wish. If Dr. Fisher is amenable. That would be afterwards during deliberations, however. That said, I believe the other three panelists, I'm going to unmute all other three panelists just so that they can confirm for me if I am or so they can correct me if I'm incorrect, that they're all here to participate in the deliberation and not in public comment. This would be, let's see, Mr. or Dr. Mueller, Ms. or Dr., again, I don't have this information in front of me, Mullenix, and Alukian Jr. Are any of you here for public comment as opposed to for the deliberation?
I can make a public comment.
Certainly. All right. Right now I have, I'm sorry, is it Mr. or Doctor?
It's Doctor, but I see there's a lady who wants to speak. Why don't we let her speak first?
Sure.
Woman, and then I'll be happy to speak after.
All right. I will unmute you again when her turn is up. Let's see. So, Ms. or Dr. Mullenix, is it? Which one is it?
It's Dr. Mullenix.
All right, Doctor. Would you like to proceed?
Okay, I have a short comment. It is concerning that local governments, such as in the city of Fitchburg, have had over 70 years of finely honed infomercials from the Public Health Service, the CDC, and the ADA describing the benefits of fluoridation on dental health, yet you limit comments on the risk of fluoridation to 20 minutes. In that time frame, you cannot begin to appreciate the liabilities or consequences facing water facilities and owners of those facilities in the event of an accident, whether a spill, a leak, or an overfeed. I implore you to take more time in understanding and preventing the health and financial harm incurred when fluoridation equipment fails or malfunctions. Public assurances that it is a, quote, mechanical impossibility to deliver a toxic or even fatal dose of fluoride into public drinking water is reckless misinformation. The CDC puts all liability onto the water facilities and the cities that own those water facilities by putting the blame on them, and they have stated this in their CDC training manuals. For example, quote, safety records show that the water treatment plant personnel have one of the highest accident injuries rate in the United States. Until water plant managers, supervisors insist on proper safety training and utilization of safety equipment, this poor record shall continue. And the fact remains that the CDC runs most of the training programs for these water facilities across the United States. Accidents, including overfeeds, are occurring almost daily, and the public remains unaware. Take the time and get the facts. The CDC is of no use to you when you're sitting at the defendant's table in the courtroom. Ask other water facilities or cities to explain what they suffered following an overfeed, like that in Sandy City, Utah, where a power outage in 2019 led to mechanical failure and the fluoride level was allowed to reach 151 parts per million, and 350 people were sickened. Unlike the overfeed in Hooper Bay, where one individual died, that's in Alaska, no one died in Sandy City that they know of, but that was by sheer luck. All the preparations to prevent an accident failed. Please get the facts before you too have to stand before the public after an accident and explain what went wrong. And do not use or go empty-handed and with the only excuse when you face that public, like the authorities did in Sandy City, Utah, and they said, quote, "We didn't know what we didn't know." That excuse is no way to build trust among the citizens of Fitchburg or citizens in any city forced to consume fluoridated water. Thank you.
Thank you. Whoops, sorry. You can ignore that request that just popped up. Dr. Lukian, you are up again.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Myron Alukian Jr. I'm a dentist, board certified in dental public health. I was the City of Boston dental director for 34 years working for the City of Boston Health Department. I've also been on the faculty of the 3 dental schools in Boston, Harvard, Tufts, and BU for many, many years, Harvard over 50 years. I was chair of the U.S. Surgeon General's work group on fluoridation and dental health, which is now part of the National Health Objectives, Healthy People 2030, which are the goals for the country for better health and oral health. Unfortunately, dental disease is one of the most common diseases in our country. Roughly 67% of teenagers have had tooth decay. 95% of older adults have had tooth decay. And the best way to treat any disease is to prevent it. And that's what's nice about community water fluoridation. It prevents the disease for everyone living in that community. It's safe and effective. Everyone benefits. The cost-benefit ratio is roughly 1 to 20. For every dollar spent on fluoridation, there's a $20 health benefit. In Massachusetts, over 4 million people have been living in fluoridated communities for years. In the United States, over 207 million people, 73% of people on public water supplies are living in fluoridated communities. I've been involved with fluoridation over 50 years. We have not had any accidents of any kind with community water fluoridation in the over 50 years I've been involved here in Massachusetts with fluoridation. I was involved in getting Boston fluoridated in 1978, 2.5 million people in 33 cities and towns. Every state health department in the country supports fluoridation. Every Surgeon General from Eisenhower on supports community fluoridation. Most major national health organizations in the United States support fluoridation. The American Public Health Association, the American Medical Association. I've heard all kinds of complaints from different people, usually a very small vocal minority, talking about fluoridation. Fluoride is in everyone's water supply, whether you want it or not. It's a normal constituent of water. The ocean is fluoridated at 1 part per million naturally, and there's no difference between a fluoride ion that's there by nature or that it's put there by man. It's nature's way to help prevent tooth decay. And fluoridation is part of your bones and teeth. Without fluoride in your bones and teeth, we'd all be in trouble. So it's safe, it's effective, it's a preventive measure that helps everyone in the community, irrespective of age, income, race, everyone benefits. So I hope that Fitchburg continues to fluoridate. I'll just close by saying I don't know why the City Council is discussing fluoridation. It's a public health issue. I would think that the Health Department or the Board of Health should, if a hearing is necessary, they hold a hearing. If there are problems with crime, you go to the police department. With fire, you go to the fire department. With health, you should go to the health department. If there are people concerned, let them express their concerns to the Board of Health, and then the Board of Health can get the information that's necessary to see if anything needs to be done from that point on. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will certainly have questions when it comes time to deliberate. Mr. Mueller, did you have anything to add in public comment? Or Dr. Mueller? Again, I apologize if it's doctor.
No, it's Mr. Mueller. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm here really to answer questions later on after the presentation, but I will just say that it was 14 years ago that I discovered what fluoridation is all about, and that what is added to the drinking water is a toxic waste from the phosphate fertilizer manufacturing, and typically from a large company in Florida that makes fertilizer, phosphate fertilizer. This is loaded directly into the smokestack scrubber washdown is loaded into specially lined treatment specially lined tanker trucks and delivered to our drinking water treatment plants. I've got experience, 25 years of experience in water resources engineering, and that includes drinking water treatment. And when I first learned 14 years ago that what is added to the drinking water to fluoridate it, the fluorosilicic acid from the phosphate mining and manufacturing plants, is typically, invariably contaminated with arsenic. The maximum contaminant level goal, the MCLG of fluoride, of fluorosilicic, of arsenic, I'm sorry, is 0. And we're knowingly adding a known carcinogen, arsenic, to the drinking water. It's legal because by the time it's diluted, it's below the maximum, the enforceable maximum contaminant level of 10 parts per billion. But nevertheless, the MCLG being 0 means that it's not safe at any level. That's how I got started. And then more recently, in the last 10 years, seeing how many studies have been done, contrary to what was said earlier, that peer-reviewed studies have been done. And those peer-reviewed studies are now showing that fluoride is the new lead, just as neurotoxic to developing brains, fetal and infants and young children as lead. And that is being presented as evidence in the federal district court in San Francisco in the federal lawsuit that CDC and EPA and Health and Human Services are very well aware of. And it's probably the biggest conundrum that the CDC has ever encountered because they've been promoting it with a false narrative for 60 years. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will now go to the audience, and I would, because I see that we have Dr. Cronin here in the audience, I'd like to offer him first crack at the podium because I know that it takes effort.
I had difficulty understanding all these speakers here. I don't know if they were speaking too fast but I agree with that second last speaker, Dr. Myron Alukian Jr. He's got the answer all there for you. All the stuff I have here was just told to you by Dr. Alukian. Now, the first time I came up here to Fitchburg from Roxbury is where I grew up, and I ended up coming up all the way up to Montreal to go to college, 4 years of college, and then 4 years of dental school at McGill University. And I started listening about fluoridation 75 years ago, and I'm tired of it. It's a lot of BS that we're facing here today. And way back in the old days, 65, 70 years ago, they used to have these organizations called the John Birch Society. Does that ring a bell with you? There was all kinds of letters coming in from all over the country saying this is a communistic and it's rat poison, it's going to kill you. Well, that was over 70 years ago and we're still going. And we've got Dr. What's his name again? mentioned the National Institute of Health. He mentioned the American Dental Association. He mentioned the Mass Dental Association. He mentioned all the recognized universities in the whole country and in Canada. And as a result, it has been 75% of the country, I believe, is now under fluoridation. And let's see, I would like to mention the fact that I was a school dentist. Go back earlier than that. After I got out of dental school, I went to France. And in France, being in the military, we had to look after not only the troops, but the families. All the families there, and these little kids were all running around, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and a lot of them had toothaches and pains, and you just can't imagine the difficulty in extracting teeth on a 3-year-old child with his mother over her shoulder. So anyway, then from there, I came to Leominster. After Fort Devens, I went to Leominster for many, many years, and in Leominster, I was a school dentist for many years. And Marty Moran, I think, was the superintendent, and God, these names have all gone by. And I used to go around every year and examine every student in the city of Leominster, right from the first grade all the way up to K-12. And we were shocked when we saw what was happening. These kids, we said to one guy, open wide so we can see what you have in there. And he said, "You want to see my teeth?" I said, "Yeah." He just took them out and he put them right on the table. 16 years old. These guys are wearing dentures. Is this what it's come to? Is this what you want to go back to? So anyway, I felt the toughest part of it was Now, the public works must be diligent in the handling of this fluoride. Fluoride is a mineral, and it's in the nature, and it comes into the ground, into the reservoirs, into the water. And some towns, like in Colorado where it was found to be state with the best teeth in the country. Their teeth were as hard, they never had any cavities. You could see it in the Army and everything. Guys come from all over the country, and you knew where they came from. If they came from New England, they were all missing. But the West Coast and the Midwest and Colorado, those teeth there were pretty hard, and it came from the fluoride. Now, fluoride is a mineral, and too much of any mineral is not good for you, and these fluorides have to be controlled. And they should be 1 part per million is the measurement for fluoride. And if you put in 5 or 6 or 7 parts per million, you can end up with trouble. So it is in the hands of the Public Works Department to see that all these measurements are made out. But I think fluoridation is a great thing for this city, and 70% or 75% of the country is fluoridated already, and I believe the rest of the country should be fluoridated. The rest, just follow that doctor, whatever his name was. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Jacqueline Wetchie, Fitchburg resident. 81 years ago, my grandmother fled Nazi Germany with her 2 preschool girls, where people like Dr. Mengele imposed their scientific ideology on others through human experimentation. My grandmother took her children from country to country before she reached the New World and freedom. She wasn't able to attend school beyond the 8th grade and worked as a maid and later on a farm. Yet she was the hero, and Dr. Mengele, with all his educational credentials and professional status, was the villain. Please consider the ethics of imposed fluoridation. In the aftermath of World War II, the Allies developed the Nuremberg Code to safeguard individual rights against medical and government overreach. It took decades for the damage from lead paint, leaded gasoline, and asbestos to be proven. The damage from fluoridation is already apparent. Approximately half our children have dental damage called fluorosis, so the government lowered its recommended levels in 2015. New research continues to show additional detrimental effects. Article 6 of the UNESCO documents on medical consent reads, "In no case should a collective community agreement or the consent of a community leader or other authority substitute for an individual's informed consent," end quote. Many people don't want to be guinea pigs. In 2019, when Commissioner DeLine approached the Board of Health about fluoridation because he wanted to sell some of our water to Leominster, they wouldn't take it with fluoride in it. I and many of your constituents also do not want to be dosed with this chemical. I've attended or watched a lot of your meetings, and people usually come here asking for money for their department or nonprofit or for a contract. We citizen activists come here tonight seeking only medical and bodily autonomy. It will cost you nothing. It will save on fluoridation expenses, and it might allow you to generate revenue from surrounding communities in the future. It's a win-win-win.
Thank you.
Jean Robbie, Fitchburg. I just want to tell you some personal stuff that happened in my life. My granddaughter, which you have met for a long time, since she was little, moving here, she always had stomach aches, stomach problems. I'd take her in, nothing. They couldn't find anything wrong with her. This happened quite a bit. I also took her in to the dentist, things you're supposed to do. She ended up with little white marks on her teeth. It looked like calcium buildup or something on her teeth. I stopped the fluoride. I buy bottled water. Stopped all that stuff. She stopped having stomach aches all the time. Her teeth aren't hurting anymore. She lost 2 baby teeth premature. That's not happening anymore. I also have a dog, bless her heart, who has dementia. I have now taken her off of city water as well. I know, as odd as that sounds, if you've ever seen a little dog with dementia, it's sad. So I'm asking for the right to make the choice for my family if I want fluoride in my life or not, or in my grandchildren's life or not. That's what I'm asking. I just want that right. So please don't put it in our water anymore. Thank you.
I didn't come here to speak, but I just wanted to, something came to my mind. My name is Lorraine Rod. I live in Lunenburg, Mass, right next door. I want to just stipulate that the doctors speaking are conventionally trained dentists. They're not nutritionists. I'm a holistic nutritionist. What we are not looking at is what's in people's diets. Are these, are babies formula fed? What happens to babies with their milk is just not addressed in even the medical field right now. So I just want you to remember that. You please take into consideration the holistic side of people's health in their bodies, not just what's coming from the conventionally trained people. Thank you.
Further public comment?
With all due respect, with respect to the doctors that have spoken, I just want to say there's a clear and blatant conflict of interest when you're a doctor for many decades and you're speaking in favor of fluoride.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need your name.
I'm Philip Valeri. I'm from Leominster. I just wanted to read, there were a couple mistruths spoken by the doctors online saying that there was absolutely zero peer review, zero evidence, zero anything about the effects of fluoridating water. And one doctor, I believe, that was just praised a minute ago was only speaking on, or it could have been the previous doctor, I don't know, but somebody said there was a report, an NTP toxicology report from 2017, but they failed to mention the 2022 report that it just came out a month ago, recently, a major story, where the assistant of the DHHS, Rachel Levine, it was revealed that she suppressed in May of 2022 a National Toxicology Program report, which reviewed, it was a meta-analysis, a 2-part meta-analysis, and it found that 52 of the 55 studies found lower IQ with higher fluoride exposures, demonstrating remarkable consistency. This is in Yahoo News mainstream reporting. And then it says, out of the 19 studies in the second part rated higher quality, 18 were found lowering of IQ, and the meta-analysis could not detect any safe exposure, including at levels common from drinking artificially fluoridated water. Documents obtained through the FOIA show government agencies that promote fluoridation allied with dental interest have tried to water down the report. When the NTP held firm, these agencies got HHS Assistant Administrator Rachel Levine to block its release. Only one historical example exists of an NTP report being blocked from release, a report on the carcinogenicity of asbestos-contaminated talc. Talc industry groups conducted an aggressive lobbying campaign enlisting friendly congresspeople to intervene. And it goes on to say, there is now little question that a large body of scientific evidence supports a conclusion that fluoride can lower a child's IQ, including at exposure levels from fluoridated water. So I just wanted to make it clear that data that was cited just recently said 2017 NTP report. This is 2019, 2020 evidence that was purposely left out of testimony to obfuscate, to block, to make a false representation of the realities of the peer-reviewed data that exists against fluoridated water in city water supplies. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. Further public comment?
Okay. I just want to say that the first meeting didn't have an agenda out there, so that's why I didn't know the... All right. So.
Gotcha. Not a problem.
So
We're at the right meeting now.
All right. I'm Jessica from Fitchburg. I'm not going to speak like I'm a doctor or anything. I can just talk about what happened to my family. So my daughter is the youngest out of my children and the only one I could not breastfeed. So I did use formula with her, and I did use the city water before I knew any better. When her teeth came in, there were white spots all over, and I didn't know what that was until I changed dentist, and he was the one who told me that it was fluoridation damage, and they came in that way. My other children did not have that. Second, I spend a lot of money to get all organic, all everything. I'm not big in chemicals. I have a very chemical-free house, and I don't want fluoride in my spaghetti when I'm boiling spaghetti. I don't want fluoride when I'm watering my garden. I don't want fluoride in my vegetables when they grow because I'm watering it with city water. I don't want fluoride all over my kids when I'm spending extra money on natural soaps. So now I'm adding these chemicals to every aspect. It's not just for my teeth. If I want fluoride, it's going to be hard to find toothpaste without fluoride. I can just go and get fluoridated toothpaste. Back when he was talking about the poor children in France, when you had to pull a 3-year-old's tooth out, how accessible was fluoride in toothpaste? So times have changed. It's harder to find toothpaste without fluoride. So you can't compare things that happened back in France, how to come to now. And then second, we should be taking in consideration to the Leominster who has gotten rid of fluoride.
Your time has expired.
Okay. And yes, we should take a consideration to Leominster and why they remove fluoride out of their water.
You. Further public comment?
Good evening. Dr. Brian McDowell, Fitchburg Fitchburg dentist for 31 years, live in Leominster. I'm not going to go through any studies, things like that. Just going to do some practical, what I've seen in my practice over the last 30 years, seeing kids from many different towns in this area, and knowing that most of the towns in this area are not fluoridated like Fitchburg is. The incidence of caries in the kids from other towns is definitely higher than we see in the kids from Fitchburg. The benefit for the adults is, even in adults in Fitchburg, we see less what they call cervical caries, which is caries by the gum line, because the fluoride in the water helps to protect those teeth, even in adults. That's really all I want to say.
Thank you. Further public comment at this time?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Mario Abujaude. I'm a dentist also in Fitchburg. I currently own the oldest dental practice in Fitchburg. The dental practice was established in the early 40s by Dr. T-Bear. He was on Main Street. And then the son moved it over to 1141 South Street. That's where we're currently at. I've been there for 20 years. I have data, I have records of, what are we now, 80 years plus. So we have our own studies in the practice. And I will tell you, fluoride does work. It is unfortunate for the people that they went through, but again, there are so many other factors to play, not only blaming fluoride. There might be other things in the water that need further investigation, or perhaps other autoimmune things that they have. I live in Leominster. I gave my kids fluoride supplements because Leominster does not have fluoride. So my kids right now are teenagers, cavity-free. And bottom line, this thing is endorsed by all the organizations. You can hardly find anything endorsed by every single organization out there. It is not beneficial for dentists to have fluoride in the water. I want business. I would prefer cavities. I am here. I mean, this is nonsense. You need to save money. We see it in action when the parents are begging us, why does my child have full-blown cavities? What am I going to do with them? I look at them, I'm like, okay, where do you live? And they tell me where they live. Is there fluoride in the water? No. I'm like, okay, the pediatrician told me about taking fluoride. However, I haven't been taking it. I'm like, okay, well, what do we do? So I can't pull up a magic wand and fix their teeth. And it's shameful at this day and age. However, from Fitchburg, we've seen the results. We've seen generational differences between the parents, the grandparents, the children. So it does work. It is nowhere near toxic levels. 0.7 parts per million is the current level right now. The toxic level, it takes at 1 part per million for an average person, which is 155 pounds, 93 gallons of water to drink to have toxic level. I call fluoride vitamin F. Just like any other vitamin out there, or mineral, there is a toxic level. There's no denying about it. However, we're nowhere near toxic levels, and it's unattainable. There's no way anyone can drink 93 gallons of water in a day. So bottom line, it does work. It's been tried. It's been tested. I apologize, I heard about this meeting very recently, but I'll be happy to furnish all kinds of websites and data and studies. And I agree with the doctor, I believe his name is Dr. Alukian, that this should be under the health situation, where perhaps if they want to review more health issues with the Fitchburg residents, it's unfortunate that their kids got sick. But yes, it's been tried and tested, and we have all the studies that we can provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment?
I'm John Bogdasarian, current chairman of the Fitchburg Board of Health. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for hosting this discussion tonight, a bit of a debate too, but I think it's reasonable for us to investigate the things that we do through the years and look at them in more modern times to see if they're still appropriate. That said, I think fluoridation of water is appropriate. I can't add much to what the dentists have said, except to say, perhaps you know, fluoride is one of the most common elements in our Earth's crust. It's everywhere. It shows up in milk, it shows up in water, it shows up in salt, it's put in a number of different things, and now it's put in toothpaste and other dental treatments by dentists. So the question is fair. Do we really need to fluoridate water when we have all these sources? Well, I know many have kind of criticized us for being somewhat discriminatory against people who are not of such economic benefit in this community. If you take away fluoridation of water, discrimination will be against the people who can't afford to go to the dentist 3 or 4 times a year for their dental hygiene visits, to afford their dental rinses with fluoride, and to have the dental care that maybe those who are more prosperous are able to do. So it's going to be the poor or the poorer people in this community who will suffer if fluoridation is taken away. Secondly, I agree completely. Fluoride is completely safe. Fluorosis, I look in hundreds of people's mouths every month, and I can't remember seeing fluorosis, which is a mottling of the teeth and breaking of teeth. If a child, it's most likely to happen in an infant. If a child eats the toothpaste and drinks the mouthwash, then maybe fluoride levels will go up. But you do not attain toxic levels from the amount of water that's very carefully monitored here in Fitchburg. And in fact, nationally, the levels of fluoride were cut in half in 2015, so we're really diminishing it, understanding that fluoride comes from other sources. As far as expense goes to this community, Fitchburg spends $70,000 a year to fluoridate water. If you say there are 7,000 families, give or take, in Fitchburg, that's $10 a family per year. Is that really going to cost us a lot of money? No. Fluoridation saves $38 in dental care for every dollar that we spend in fluoridation of water. The dentists here are actually taking money out of their own pockets to come here and advocate for the health of the community. But think, for 15 root canals done and paid for by people or extractions, you're going to save that $70,000. So actually, if you calculate $70,000 times saving 35 to 40, you're saving $2.5 million of dental care that people in this city are going to have to pay for without fluoridation of water. Fluoridation of water cuts down about 25% of cavities, so that's saving quite a few people dental care. So again, I strongly suggest that we continue fluoridation. It's already been mentioned that a sister city to ours has significantly worse dental problems than we do because we fluoridate our water. Perhaps they should be thinking about it also. Again, I really appreciate everyone's time and coming and listening to us and understanding, and I think it's very fair that individuals should have ability to give their concerns about it. But I emphasize fluoridation is extremely safe. There are many other confounding factors that I think would explain some of the problems that individuals come up. My 2 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further public comment at this time? No. Come on up.
Hi. Jane Andrews, Fitchburg. I just wanted to add that fluoride they've done studies that they say that it could cause babies to be preterm, it causes neurological problems in with children, and also I've also learned recently about that it could be a reason for preeclampsia, and and that's one thing that a while back that they didn't know what caused that, the preeclampsia. So this could be something. I want to say that if people want to have the fluoride, they can buy the toothpaste that has the fluoride, or they could buy the tablets. They could get them from the dentist. Maybe the dentist could provide it free if they believe in it. And I just encourage that Fitchburg would take the fluoride out of the water so that people can cook spaghetti or whatever and not have it alter their food. Because I heard that even boiling the water does not take the fluoride out. So thank you for your time, and God bless you all.
Any further public comment at this time? Seeing none, we will move on to our agenda. You may, Councillor?
I am the petitioner. I'd like to start it off, if I may.
Oh, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I have a lot to open with, as my name is on this. When I filed this, I was concerned about how I would be perceived amongst members of the community because of something that's been done for decades that no one really has questioned. It is my opinion that, like many other public health discussions, there is an air of condescension, there is talking down to. We are discussions about these things in some people's minds. We're told to be quiet, trust the evidence, just keep going on with our lives. It is my opinion from what I've heard already this evening that some feel that this is a waste of time, that this is unnecessary, and this is ridiculous. Well, we are here as a council to discuss this because the Board of Health cannot statutorily change this policy. If they could, they would have done something by now. They cannot. We, as a city council, by law, we have to decide if we submit a home rule petition to the state legislature to have fluoridated water treatments end. That's why this is here. It's not in the hands of the health agencies. It's in the hands of the elected people of this city. And if you don't like that, that's something you have to take up with your state legislature. When I filed this, I said to myself, based on what happened during the pandemic, that you're going to have two sides of the issue. It may even come down to political lines, which it should never, but it can't help it. And I said to myself, well, obviously there's going to be a group of people who are going to say this has detrimental health effects to people, and there's going to be the medical community, by and large, their consensus it does not. Honestly, when I filed this, I didn't file this because I feel like my life is in danger, that I feel like I am actively participating in harming people in this city, or that people are being harmed. There are two sides to that debate. And I think the public should hear both sides and determine themselves who they find more credible and what they believe. I filed this because my thought in this whole thing, and I am not a medical expert, obviously. I am not even a subject matter expert. I filed this because of the research that I've done, EPA, FDA, WHO, other agencies, private individual agencies, medical agencies, and there are many dentists I have read that do not agree with this practice. Unfortunately, they're never talked about. I filed this because I asked myself, is this necessary? In 2023, is it necessary? And what caught my attention to it was reading publications on how the government has consistently in the last 20 years lowered the levels allowed. Understanding that many of my colleagues on this council will place a great deal of importance, probably all of the importance, on what the FDA, the CDC, the DPH says, my simple question to the public watching is, if fluoride is not of a concern, why do our federal public health agencies keep lowering the limits? Why do they keep lowering the limits? Was lead allowed for consumption decades ago? Yes. Is it allowed today? No. Arsenic? Yes. Today? No. Fluoride was at 1.6 25 years ago. It lowered itself to, they lowered it to 1.2. And then in 2015, as Dr. Bogdasarian just testified, they cut it in half to 0.7. They keep lowering the levels. Now, why are they doing that? If there is no concern, and this is what I've asked myself, not as a medical professional, as someone with objective-minded common sense, if something is safe for all of us, and it's undeniable, why do these regulatory agencies keep dropping the number? It's a fair question to ask. Because if there is no concern, as we've been told many times today, why is it changing? I'd like to know that. I have an opinion that the government knows more than they're telling us, but they're trying to placate both sides. So they want to look independent, so they'll say, we're going to lower the limit, but we're not going to get rid of it. So the dental community's happy, and the public's seeing that we're looking out for them. But they're lowering it. They are seeing things that I haven't even seen that would suggest to them that they have no choice but to lower it. And that's what brought me here today. It's not a requirement in our water supply. It's an additive. For those who talked about it naturally occurring in the landscape, yes, it does. A lot of things that we consume or we inhale come from radon. Radon is in the air right now. But why does the government have restrictions on radon in your homes? New homes today have to have radon mitigation systems. They've lowered that level. Why is fluoride any different in this case? Of course it's naturally occurring, but we're infusing this artificially into the water. I don't think
Counselor, I would ask that you introduce your petition, but hold argument until after we've heard the presentations.
I am presenting why I filed this. Am I not allowed to give my opinion on why I filed this?
You can explain why you filed it. Just
am I
please
going
don't
to get
give your
interrupted
entire.
every meeting,
Counselor,
sir, when I talk?
Counselor, don't interrupt me.
I don't answer to you, Mr. President.
Point of order. The ruling of the chair can't be debated.
Exactly. Counselor, when I am sitting here and you were sitting there, you do answer to me. You answer to the rules of this council, which I am charged with enforcing.
So I'm not allowed to present my rationale behind this because I've been publicly sullied by people because I filed.
You have been presenting your rationale. If you have additional rationale behind bringing it forth that is not repetitive or argumentative, please continue. If you wish to argue your point, please wait until we can all deliberate.
Continuing what I was saying of why I filed this, the limits keep getting lowered. No one that I have discussed this with has told me that this must be done. So I asked myself, why are we doing it? Let's have a discussion on why it's being done. And I want people to please understand that when you see these agencies lower the levels, and you see these other agencies not require it, but recommend it, it's not out of the realm of possibility to ask if it's necessary. And that's why I brought this forward, because people asked me to bring it forward. I myself have a personal concern about it. I will say much more after the presentations. But in closing, for the introductory phase, I just want to point out to everybody that while it was stated that 75% of the country fluoridates water, 62% of the state of Massachusetts does not. There are 219 communities in Massachusetts that do not fluoridate their water, and that's per Mass DPH Office of Oral Health from a 2021 study that I pulled right from mass.gov. 62% do not fluoridate their water, including our neighbors. And I'll get into much more later on, but I just want that fact out there from Mass DPH. If this is such a public health issue that we must not go away from, why does almost 2/3 of this Commonwealth not do it? Thank you.
All right. Presentation may commence.
Hello, my name is Karen Favaza Spencer. And since fiscal responsibility and legality are critical to city councils, I'm going to offer a primarily economic perspective today. Next. Fluoridation is considered a state or municipal decision, but those decisions are not supposed to be any less protective than federal regulations. Moreover, all waters are considered a national resource, albeit managed locally. Fluoridation programs fail to fulfill the letter and intent of many national acts, like the Clean Water Act that regulates pollutants, Safe Drinking Water Act that is supposed to protect susceptible populations, the FIFA Act regarding manufactured poisons, RCRA, Hazardous Waste, and TSCR, the Toxic Substances Control Act that protects against unreasonable risks posed by any chemical use. Next. Fluoride should be regulated under all those federal statutes. The city's annual water quality report lists fluoride, which is a water contaminant, along with PFAS, barium, and radium, characterized by the EPA as a gold standard developmental neurotoxicant, as the only substance added to water to treat man. Next. Moreover, we add fluoride. When we add fluoride, it's not just fluoride. Fluoride is a byproduct of phosphate mining and manufacturing. Each batch of the hydrofluorosilicic acid Fitchburg buys has a different percentage of arsenic, lead, and hydrogen fluoride listed on the certificate of analysis. All of those contaminants have a zero contaminant goal for water because they are known health hazards. Yet, the concentration for the highly carcinogenic arsenic can be as high as 50 parts per million in fluoridation chemicals. Fitchburg adds 3,500 gallons of HFSA to its water annually. I estimate the cumulative amount added since 1975 is close to 250,000 tons. Next. This timeline bears close scrutiny. The non-enforceable goals described in the 1974 Safe Drinking Water Act are based solely on possible health risks and exposure over a lifetime with an adequate margin of safety for susceptible subpopulations. In 2006, the National Research Council of the National Academies of Science advised the EPA that their fluoride contaminant goal, which is the same as their actionable threshold, was not protective of human health. Moreover, the NRC advised the EPA that there was no evidence of safety for susceptible subpopulations at any concentration. Those populations include pregnant women and their fetuses, bottle-fed infants and young children, the elderly, and those in fragile health. EPA has failed to act, saying fluoride is a low-priority item. In 2017, a de novo lawsuit was filed against the EPA in federal court based on evidence of prenatal and postnatal harm to developing brains and the TSCR regulations regarding unreasonable risk. That lawsuit has been delayed repeatedly, but has a January 2024 trial date. Next. Still, fluoridationists loudly protest that fluoridation prevents cavities and saves consumers money. A 2015 critique of that cost-benefit claim found it to be totally without merit. I quote, "Minimal correction reduced the savings to $3 per person per year for a best-case scenario. But this savings is eliminated by the estimated cost of treating dental fluorosis." Next. A Cochrane collaborative analysis is considered the international gold standard of science. When Cochrane looked at the efficacy of fluoridation in 2015, they found no socioeconomic benefit to poor children and no benefit to adults. But they did determine that at our current optimal concentration of 0.7 parts per million, dental fluorosis would likely result in 40% of consumers having fluoride-damaged teeth, with 12% considering the effect objectionable. Next. According to hard U.S. data, Cochrane wasn't too far off, but they didn't account for other sources of fluoride. We've seen this impact in multiple national surveys. More than half of American teens have dental fluorosis on at least 2 teeth, and about 20% have moderate to severe dental fluorosis. Fluorosis literally means poisoned by fluoride. And moderate to severe means 50% or more of the affected teeth are not only badly stained, as women have testified today, but likely brittle. The result will be costly cosmetic dentistry during young adulthood. Next. A Fitchburg mother testified on March 21st that because she had to bottle feed her youngest child, that her child's teeth came in stained. You'd be surprised who it affects. Groton dentist Dr. Bob Evans is the father of Chris Evans, the actor who plays Captain America. Dr. Evans testified at the Boston State House that he was horrified when, after following the American Dental Association's fluoride recommendations, his son's permanent teeth came in with severe dental fluorosis. Next time you see Captain America at the movies, know this: he has veneers worth thousands of dollars hiding the damage caused by fluoride. Dr. Evans' testimony is attached to this presentation, which I sent to you in advance, as are other items used as graphics on these slides. Dr. Evans dropped his ADA membership and his MDA membership and joined the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. The ADA is a consumer group that benefits dentists, while the IAOMT, like other organizations opposed to fluoridation, has a science and patient focus. I urge you to investigate the IAOMT documents. Next. Many notable civil and human rights activists oppose fluoridation. The Texas chapter of the League of United Latin American Citizens is the largest group of Hispanics in the country. They've opposed fluoridation since 2011 because of its disproportionate harm to Hispanic and Black populations. It's a genetics thing. Ambassador Andrew Young, whose father and grandfather were dentists, is one of several Black leaders openly opposed to fluoridation. Using the formula provided by Dr. Hardy Lineback, the retired head of preventative dentistry at the University of Toronto, I calculate that about 15,000 consumers of Fitchburg water will pay approximately $25 million for cosmetic dentistry over the next 40 years in order to repair the dental damage done to them during their childhood by fluoridation policy. Next. But this isn't about teeth. Dental fluorosis is associated with increased learning disabilities, and both dental and mental damage are found on a dose-response trend line, which begins below the optimal concentration. And since dose is dependent on consumption, the dose of fluoride very much exceeds safety thresholds for those who, for whatever reason, consume more waters. That group includes diabetics and those with kidney disease. Families generally assume dental and medical costs and bottled or filtered water costs, but the city assumes the cost for the increased rates of ADHD and other disabilities such as low IQ. As you know, SPED costs are significant. Moreover, these children are more likely to present an economic drain on society as adults. Next. I trust you read the recent reports on the suppression of the National Toxicology Program's multi-year systematic review and meta-analysis on fluoride. FOIA documents and whistleblower testimony reveal that the Oral Health Division of the CDC lobbied Admiral Rachel Levine at Health and Human Services to deep six the NTP analysis, which validated pre- and postnatal exposure to fluoride consistent with fluoridation policy results in lowered IQ. HHS has a budget in excess of $100 million to promote fluoridation. That money funds the Oral Health Division of the CDC, as well as provides funding to state departments of public health. The local Board of Health is the operating arm of the State Department of Public Health. The lawsuit against the EPA based on developmental neurotoxicity under TSCA has been on hold since 2020, pending the publication of that NTP report. Next. But back to economics. There are 500 births per year in Fitchburg. If those pregnant women purchased bottled water for their families during their pregnancies, it would cost those families $200,000. If they continued using bottled water up until their child's 3rd birthday in an attempt to protect teeth and brains, that would be a $1 million annual cost, $4 million till age 12 per cohort, which citywide is $48 million per year for your constituents with young families. Fluoride suppresses thyroid hormones, increasing incidence of low thyroid in fluoridated communities by 30 to 50% per peer-reviewed studies published in credible medical journals. It is also nephrotoxic. It damages kidneys, especially in those who already have impaired kidney function. So those with thyroid and kidney disease are often advised by their doctors to avoid fluoridated water. But again, those are constituent costs. Next, in addition to additional SPED costs, the city has liability risks. The 2019 Sandy, Utah fluoride overfeed only affected 600 homes, but the financial impact was huge. The city paid the EPA fines, but is still dealing with lawsuits, and consumers are still dealing with health impact. In 2005, there was a fluoride accident at the Westminster Water Treatment Plant that required state and private hazmat crews for cleanup and resulted in 3 workers being transported to the hospital. On February 24th, Sun Prairie's utilities in Wisconsin discovered a failed fluoride pump valve resulted in a fluoride concentration of over 13 parts per million in their system. The maximum EPA contamination is 4. Luckily, they were able to isolate and flush the poisoned water before it reached consumers. Fluoridation is an unnecessary liability risk for the city. Next. I don't have time to go through this list of different community experiences, but you have the hyperlinked slide. However, I will mention that none of the communities in Berkshire, Barnstable, or Nantucket counties fluoridate, and that in 2019, Edgartown ratified a town ordinance that effectively bans fluoridation. Next. Then there are the environmental concerns. Fluoride is scientifically characterized as a poison, and the chemical Fitchburg adds to city water is not only contaminated with arsenic, lead, and hydrogen fluoride, but other harmful substances that we don't test for. And about 99% of it goes directly to wastewater. Suffice to say, fluoride affects soil chemistry and upsets ecosystems through its toxic effects on plants, insects, amphibians, fish, birds, etc. Then there's the pollution from plastic water bottles. If Fitchburg wants to reduce pollution and fight climate change, ending fluoridation would be a step in that direction. Next. The Dover, New Hampshire utility superintendent said fluoridation chemicals are worse than battery acid. They are, which is why there is so much maintenance required on fluoridation equipment. Additionally, chlorine and fluoride have a sinister synergy. Many, many water workers are opposed to fluoridation. Next. Most communities prefer not to look, but the cost of the fluoride chemical is about half the annual operational cost. Next. But I know many of us want to cling to the magic potion narrative. I did. Grand Rapids, Michigan has been fluoridated since 1945. And in April 2019, a pediatric dentist reported that the youngest patients in his practice have between 3 and 20 cavities on their first visit. Last week, a press release from the New York City Health and Hospitals stated that childhood dental cavities were epidemic and advised that regular visits to the dentist were the best way to reduce cavities. New York City has been fluoridated since 1965. Next. Fluoridation doesn't matter. Not when it comes to cavities. Most of the world does not fluoridate, and the dental decay decreased in those countries in the 20th century at the same rate because of quality of life improvements since World War II and before. Next. Dentist John Calhoun was the first prominent fluoridationist who publicly changed his mind after he looked at the data. He lost his job over it, but he published 2 famous articles in medical journals, one with this graph demonstrating that fluoridation and fluoridated dental products, the purple line, were coincidental cause the reduction of cavities, the black line. Although there are about a dozen late 20th century studies showing no increase in cavities after cessation, there are 2 21st century cavity studies claiming ending fluoridation increased cavities. Both are flawed. One uses a date 7 years before cessation for comparison, and most of the increase in decay in that community occurred while it was fluoridated. The other uses Medicaid codes as proxies for cavities, but there were significant changes in Medicaid during that period. Nevertheless, cavity rates seem to be increasing in recent years in both fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. Crumbling infrastructure, poor nutrition, and lack of access to affordable dental care are to blame. Next. Still, zealous fluoridationists keep trying. The latest studies show that there's a fraction of a single cavity less in children living in fluoridated communities. But I doubt it's even that, given the known bias of those authors who opine that the increased lead in the blood of children who drink fluoridated tap water is less of a concern than the clinically inconsequential size of a single cavity. Next. Fluoridation doesn't reduce decay, not in Grand Rapids, New York City, or in Fitchburg, but it can make teeth unattractive and brittle. It increases SPED costs because it is a developmental neurotoxicant. Thousands of your constituents pay millions for bottled water because they have medical reason not to consume it. Then there are the hidden operational costs, as well as an accelerated destruction of infrastructure. The city assumes various liabilities. Fluoridation pollutes the environment, contaminates the water table, and contributes to plastic pollution. Fluoridation policy may have started with good intentions, but it is a misguided and immoral medical mandate that is bad for people, planet, and pocketbooks. Counselors, relevant to next steps, you each have a one-page handout that summarizes some of the material in this, as well as provide you with draft language for your consideration. But before we get to that, we have 2 experts on Zoom who will be happy to answer your questions. Dr. Phyllis Mullenix, Mr. Muller, who is highly certified as a water treatment specialist, and of course myself. Thank you for your attention and time. And I have more slides here with American data and charts and whatever you'd like to talk about.
Thank you very much. Before we open this up to the council, I'd like to just make a few introductory remarks, not on topic, as to process. First, I want to note that just because this has come up in the past, that the presenters and the experts, both on that slide and the others who have joined us, who I thank for being here, are here from this point forward as resources to answer questions from councillors and will not be participating in the debate by the council. This goes double, of course, for audience members. This is not a sort of free-for-all discussion, which, again, I mention only because it's come up in the past. Councillor, question on the process?
Yes, on the process. Are we hearing from the Water Commission or our Water Commissioner before we deliberate?
We will certainly be inviting input from our city officials, yes. I just wanted to lay out sort of the ground rules firsthand. And I don't think there was anything else I needed to add. So with that, if we do have any remarks from our city officials, you're certainly welcome to. All right, they are available to answer questions. And Councillor Di Natale.
Oh, I'm ready to, during the deliberation process. I'll just read it.
You can go right ahead. Okay, I think. Oh, I do. I'm sorry. 1 second. I do just want to apologize to Dr. Alukian. I did see your hand up during the presentation or during the discussion beforehand. I forget which. There, as I said, I can't. I have to have the same set of rules for everyone. You will. The council will be allowed to ask you questions, but I can't take additional input from you at this time. But I do anticipate there will be plenty of opportunity for you to receive questions from the council. And that said, go right ahead, Councillor Di Natale.
I have.
And Ms. Spencer, you can sit at the table if you prefer.
Thank you.
I do have a few questions for Mr. Mueller and Dr. Mullinex, but when I looked at this matter, I wanted to ask myself, is this a necessary practice for us to continue doing? And I didn't really want to focus my arguments on whether it has negative or positive health benefits or negative effects. I know there's others that will, and that's fine. Because where I'm coming down on this is that our public water supply is in very good hands. I consider it to be high quality, considering the reports that we receive. And so I didn't want this to be construed by anyone, certainly in the water division, that I think that the public should be concerned about its water. I merely came to the forefront here in wondering if this is necessary to do, because up to this point, I haven't heard any arguments saying that it must be done, that it will be detrimental if it's not done. There are a couple of facts that I can't escape when we're talking about this specific type of chemical. And that, again, is the fact that 62% of the state does not fluoridate their water, either by choice or because they don't have a public drinking water supply to grab from. But 62%. I wish I could put the link up because I'm not making that number up. 62% don't. And there is no...
Ask a point of clarification,
yes.
Councillor?
Yes.
Is that 62% of communities or 62% of the population?
No, 62% of communities. The list is right here. 219 cities and towns do not fluoridate their water, according to Mass DPH, either because they don't have a supply to drink from, or their city or town, like Leominster, for example, actively chooses not to do it. So it's cities and towns. It's not population.
Thank you.
So I looked at this and I said, well, we have it in our toothpaste. We have it in mouthwash. We get it through our treatments every 6 months at the dentist office. Why, therefore, is it necessary to add it to the water? And there was an argument made earlier about the less fortunate, the poor, I don't like using that word, but low income or those that don't have a lot of financial don't have a lot of financial means. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but in today's world, we have so many programs that support those who are financially not well off. We provide public assistance to people who need access to medical care, food, basic necessities. And that includes toothpaste, mouthwash, dental hygiene products. You can go to any drugstore, any Walmart, Target, you name it, and they're all there in mass abundance. And I have seen many people personally at a grocery store who do use public assistance buying dental hygienic products. So I just, for me, I can't accept the argument, for me, that the access isn't there and that people do not use it, or many people cannot use it, and therefore fluoridating the water is like the last line of defense for them. I'm not convinced that that's the case. I go to the dentist every 6 months, and my dentist says to me every 6 months, are you flossing twice a day? Are you brushing your teeth twice a day? As far back as I can recall, he and then she have never asked me about my fluoride intake. They've said, brush your teeth twice, floss twice. Now, you can tell from my mouth, if you examine it closely, I've lived here 40 years, my whole life. I've drank this water for 40 years. I'm not going to walk out of here today saying that I'm in trouble health-wise if I keep drinking it. I know some believe we are. I'm not prepared to go that way, pro or con. That's not why I came here. But I have multiple cavities when I was a young kid and as a young adult. I haven't in about 15 or 20 years. Why? Because for me personally, I took better care of my teeth. I drank a lot of sugary drinks when I was a kid, a lot. And my dentist would tell me, sometimes brushing your teeth twice a day and flossing does not prevent cavities, because there are hundreds and hundreds of bacteria in foods and drinks that brushing and flossing will not completely get rid of. And that was as recent as a year ago with my daughter seeing a pediatric dentist who said that to my wife and I when they found out that my son had 2 cavities at 6 years old. We religiously brush and floss his teeth on a daily basis. And the dentist looked at us and said, and I quote, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get cavities. Okay. Then she went into the whole bacteria talk. So there's dentists I've talked to that don't agree that it's not safe, but that it's not the cure-all to end-all for dental health. I don't know, and I'm not doubting the medical experts on the other side. I am not here to tell them they're wrong. I'm not here to tell them that they're not being truthful. They know more than I do their patients, but what they cannot tell me, for those that are from other cities and towns, supposedly have higher rates of problems, what is their medical hit? Do they brush their teeth regularly and floss? My doctor doesn't know what I do every day. My dentist doesn't know. I mean, I can lie and say I do, but the proof is in the pudding. We don't really know why some communities have more than others, unless you live in that person's house and see, are they really brushing and flossing twice a day? And what are they drinking all day? What are they eating all day? I don't know. Half of my family's from Leominster. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, some of my uncles and aunts. I mean, I have never heard anybody from these cities say that there is a public health crisis with regards to dental hygiene. I haven't seen the clarion call that we must do this. I haven't been convinced of it. And I've talked to some people within the city that are close to this, and they're kind of nonchalant about it too. Yeah, you can keep doing it. Not going to lose any sleep if you don't. Well, this doesn't sound to me like it's that big of a crisis if we weren't to do it. Again, I am going down the path of my own experiences and what I see and what I read and what I hear, not whether it's harmful to us or not. Because there's many things in our society that are harmful to us that we cannot escape. It was said earlier that it's naturally occurring. Of course it is. We're treating this water with it, though. We're not arguing that you can't avoid it entirely. Obviously, you can't. And to emphasize to my colleagues and to those in the public who rely heavily on our public health agencies, and I'm not saying we should not, if the CDC, the FDA, the EPA, if they don't believe it's a problem, why do they keep lowering the limit? What are they seeing that would drive them to make those decisions? If it's safe, if it's effective, if there's no concerns, why are they lowering these levels? I'd like an answer to that question, because
I'd be happy to answer that question, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to answer that question.
Dr. Alukian, Dr. Alukian, why are these agencies not, why are they continuing to lower the levels of fluoride in the water, public drinking water?
Okay, let me explain it. I'm glad you asked that question, because a number of people have misunderstood why the fluoride level has been decreased in terms of a recommendation. When the original recommendations were made for fluoridation, there was a range. The range was from 0.7 to 1.2. And it was a range because in the hotter climates, people drank more water. And in the colder climates, they drank less water. So based on the average annual temperature of the community over several years, you put the fluoride level at the level where people would get the benefit and not have any negative effects of any kind. So it was a range. It's been a range since 1962, I believe, 0.7 to 1.2. Now, why they came out with one number, 0.7, which is in the middle of which is the lower part of 0.7 to 1.2, is they found that because of heating systems and air conditioning systems, people in the northern parts and the southern parts of the country were drinking essentially the same amount of water because of air conditioning and the heating systems. So then they came out with the level of 0.7. And they haven't lowered it since, and they've never really lowered it. It's always been originally 0.7 to 1.2, then it went to 0.7. You mentioned 1.6. It has never been 1.6. There have been communities that have been naturally fluoridated for generations, up to 4 parts per million and more. And maybe that's where you got your 1.6. But it's never been over 1.2. It's been 0.7 to 1.2. The other question you raised was about brushing and flossing. When I did a study in Boston before we fluoridated.
So, Doctor, I apologize for cutting you off, but as I said, I have to apply the same rules to everyone, and the only question the counselor asked you to answer was one.
I just wanted to give him the correct information.
Oh, sure. No, I completely understand. And if if the counselor or some other counselor wants to ask that question, they certainly can.
Thank you, Doctor, for that information. It is true also that there are chemicals that we are exposed to every day that the government deemed safe for exposure decades ago that they no longer do. And it's not, the discussion starts somewhere, and there isn't without precedent with regards to things that we thought were safe before that gradually become learned that are not safe now. I wanted to note for the public that the EPA has a maximum limit of 4.0 milligrams per liter. That is almost 3 times higher than the WHO. So it's just a general thought in my head of the WHO, World Health Organization, has a almost 3 times lower limit on what we can be exposed to than the EPA does. Countries like Canada, the European Union, India, China, Australia, they have levels that are almost 3 times lower than the EPA. I mean, this is a rhetorical question, but what are these countries seeing that we're not seeing? I don't know.
I'd be happy to answer that question.
Doctor, I'm sorry. Please, I will call on you if there's a direct question, but otherwise, I have to ask, please don't unmute yourself.
Okay, I thought he was asking that.
No, sorry.
No, I apologize. I will call on you.
I will wrap it up very soon. I'm going to wrap it up. Here's my closing statement here. What drove me to this subject was the fact that it is an optional practice to employ. It's not required. 62% of the state does not do it. This state does not do it, most of it. This state, we're not talking Wyoming or Kentucky or Florida, Massachusetts. And so I ask myself, why are we doing it? I've received no real justification for doing it other than it'll improve the dental health of our community. But I just, something doesn't make sense to me of why all these other communities who don't do it, why there isn't this clarion call, we must fluoridate. Our people are suffering. Our teeth are decaying. I'm not seeing that to lead me to believe that this is why that is in fact the reason. I'm not even looking at the economics. I trust that our water supply is in great hands, and I'm not here to criticize the water supply operations at all. What I would like to mention is it was stated a couple of weeks ago by Deputy Commissioner DeLine that it's a misconception that there are communities that want to buy our water, and because we fluoridate, they will not buy it. Fair enough. Taking that at face value, I have no reason to doubt his statement. It's true. But who's to say in 5 or 10 years that won't change? What if these communities end up wanting to buy our water? This may preclude them from doing that. I said may, I didn't say it will. This may preclude them from doing that. It sounds to me like Leominster, in this particular, is doubling down. They're not racing to fluoridate their water. In fact, they're telling us, we're not going to take yours if you're doing it. And so this wasn't meant for me to try to scare people. Understanding there are two sides to the discussion, and there's going to be a lot of skepticism, a lot of concern about who's saying what. I wanted to come down in the middle of the necessity of it, okay? And the fact that it's just one less thing I think we need to put in there. I don't understand. I'm not convinced it needs to be in there. And with that, I just have a couple of questions for some of the panel. Dr. Mullinex, this one is for you. I see that you're a court-certified expert witness. What can you tell us about the legal issues relevant to fluoride accidents like the fluoride overfeed in Utah?
Yes, I've been involved in multiple fluoride poisoning cases that as a result of accidents of various kinds. So my concern was always the toxicity of fluoride, and there are multiple types of exposures that has resulted in poisonings. And one of them that I've been involved in is the overfeed situations, especially in Sandy, and even in Utah, subsequent to Sandy, there have been other overfeeds. And when we got involved in the investigation, we uncovered evidence that there are more overfeeds that are happening on a regular basis that have been hidden, primarily because of the local health departments who is in charge of the accident reports have been withholding information that was just realized and revealed with these investigations. So the problem is ongoing. It's cost, the solutions and the litigation is not over with. It's going to go on further times, and it's created a lot of concern among the water facilities and their owners that they are going to face the same situation that Sandy has been in, and they've been getting bills and will continue to get bills from people that were harmed, and they have to replace the infrastructure. And quite frankly, these towns and these water facilities cannot afford this type of liability. And they are shouldering the entire liability of these costs. And the health directors and the health people have been totally gone in silent and of no help whatsoever. And it's brought the full force of the laws down, which come to find out, some of the investigations, they were breaking laws that the county and the cities had improper oversight of the implementation of fluoridation. What you have here is yes, you have a public health policy that's pushing, the notion that it is a safe for prevention of dental decay. But what you have is a break in the implementation and doing safe implementation. And that evidence of the safety is being buried, and the water facilities are not explaining all of these details because the local health departments have the boot on their necks and they're afraid of speaking out.
Doctor,
yes.
I need to ask you to stick only to factual information, not argumentation and editorializing.
I'm not editorializing. I'm telling you what is happening, and the health departments, they have evidence that is under investigation where they are. The water facilities are in fear of retaliation. They hold over them their licenses. They hold over them their sanitary surveys. And so the water facility operators are afraid to speak out unless they're given whistleblower status. And that's what we're shooting for, is to give the whistleblower status to tell us and the health officials what's really going on.
My other question for Dr. Mullinex, and anyone else for that matter, I mean, I cannot get past the fact that there are 62% of communities in this state that don't fluoridate their water or cannot because they don't have the supply. I look at our next door neighbor in Leominster, since a lot of people like to compare us to them. I call them utopia because I'm told every week how they're perfect and we're not. Why? I'll just ask Dr. Mull, I mean, how can I sit here as a legislator and listen to the dental community, who I respect greatly, and tell me that this is necessary for dental health, and yet these communities refuse to treat their water with it? What? And yet I don't understand their rationale. Do you have any idea why these communities refuse to reverse their policies and fluoridate? It's not a lot of money to do it. Commissioner DeLine told me weeks ago, we're talking $20,000. Why are these communities refusing to reverse course and do what's necessary for the public health of dental needs? Why are they not doing it?
Go ahead, Dr. Mullinex. You were the one asked. You're muted. And I will ask again, just because I've been seeing it on my screen multiple times over the last few minutes, other Zoom attendees, please do not unmute yourself unless I call on you.
It's 2014. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, okay. There are a number of reasons, and they run the gamut. But one of the reasons is because there has been so much controversy. Things have changed over the years. The science keeps evolving. You can't put in a public health policy using studies from 70 years ago and expect them not to change with time. And every time a science study comes out and we further our knowledge, the response by the CDC and some of them is just simply to undermine or denigrate the scientists that have done these studies and not open up the discussions and to consider that what we know now is a far greater information than what we knew 70 years ago. So there's a lot of people and a lot of communities that hold their opinions and do not because they don't want to be forced to take medication. And fluoride in the drinking water to treat human disease is treatment of the masses that risks mistreating individuals.
Dr. Mullinex, would you answer the same question? Why are these communities not doing what we're being told this evening by many health experts is a necessity for good dental hygiene? Why are they refusing to do it?
I believe you mean Dr. Alukian?
Mullinex.
Mullinex just answered.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Alukian.
Dr. Alukian. Same question to you, sir. Doctor, I just need to understand why are these other communities not reversing policy?
And I'm sorry, I did not mean to remute you, Doctor. I just misclicked.
Oh, okay. Can I speak now?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not sure where you're getting your numbers, but when I look at the numbers from the state health department, roughly 62% of the population in Massachusetts who live on public water supplies, because there are a number of people who don't have a public water supply, but roughly 62% of the population in Massachusetts is living in fluoridated communities.
So how much?
I just wanted to give you the correct.
Right, and I emphasized earlier that I wasn't talking about population, I was talking about cities and towns, understanding that most of those towns and cities are small in population, under 30,000, but you've got cities like Leominster, Plymouth, Pittsfield, West Hampton, Brockton, Chicopee that don't do it.
You mentioned Brockton. Brockton did order fluoridation a number of years ago. They're not fluoridated, but they did order fluoridation a number of years ago in their, and they may have even ordered it twice. They're not fluoridated, but they did order fluoridation.
So let's just say that, okay, let's just take that as face value, that 62% of the population is. What about the other 38%? I mean, if this is such a public health necessity, shouldn't we want everybody to have it?
That's a good question. Nationally, 73% of the U.S. population on public water supplies has fluoridation. It varies from community to community. It's a local Board of Health decision in Massachusetts. Connecticut was the first state to make it mandatory for the whole state, so most of the state in Connecticut is fluoridated. But you had also mentioned brushing and flossing doesn't prevent tooth decay. It's the fluoride in the toothpaste that prevents the tooth decay. And it's the fluoride in the water. While you were growing up in that community, the teeth are stronger. But you have a systemic and a topical benefit from water fluoridation. That's why it's different from topical fluoride, because the teeth are stronger as they're growing, and then you get a benefit once the teeth are exposed to the fluoride toothpaste as well. When we did our first survey, one of our surveys in Boston before we fluoridated, 17-year-olds. 100% of 17-year-olds had tooth decay with an average of 17 cavities. So when you say to me, gee, my kid had 2 cavities, well, fluoridation doesn't prevent tooth decay 100%, but it prevents it now roughly 25%, and the extent of the tooth decay is less as well. So not only do you have fewer cavities, but those cavities are much smaller. Before we fluoridated in Boston, I was looking at kids' mouths with abscesses and pus coming out of their gums. Since we fluoridated, dramatic improvement. Do kids still have cavities? Sure, but they don't have 17. They may have 2 or 3, but there's been a dramatic improvement. One other thing I want to mention, the first communities...
Doctor, I'm sorry. Again, I have to hold you just to the question.
Okay, fine.
I'm not going to take any more time. I've said my...
Deputy Commissioner DeLine indicated that he had an answer to your question. If you would like to hear it, Counselor, I'll hold him to the same rules as everyone else.
But the one I just asked?
Yes, the why is everyone else not fluoridating?
Why are these communities not fluoridating? What's the reason?
Good evening. I think you'll find that, we think of Fitchburg's water system. We had some, large water treatment plants, as does Leominster and things. But there are a multitude of small systems that just have a well or something like that. And because, the chemical we use for fluoridation is a hazardous chemical, it's not feasible for them to fluoridate without spending a tremendous amount on a facility to house that equipment and then have additional operators. A lot of these people don't even have full-time operators at these facilities, whereas if they did have fluoridation, they would have to do that. So it would be a tremendous expense. But it says, we don't, when you think of a public water supply system, you think of Fitchburg's, but there's, like I said, whether it's Massachusetts or the country itself, there is many, many more number-wise, but very small populations that are just served by a well or something small like that, where it's just not feasible for to do that. So that might, just trying to, give you some insight why some aren't doing it. So,
sure.
Okay.
Thank you. In closing, I want to thank everybody for allowing me to put this forward. Understanding that whenever we get into a matter of public health, that there are differing opinions from experts, doctors, and I would just hope that in the end, whatever decision this council makes, that, the public understand that more information is better, and some of that information may not be pleasing to hear or may run counter to what you have previously believed. But it's necessary for people to learn. There are things about fluoride that I'm learning right now that I didn't know was the case from the side that opposes my petition. I do not consider this a waste of time. I'm not saying anybody on the council said that, but I thank everybody for having this discussion and the future discussions that we'll have momentarily. Where I'm going to come down on this for myself as the petitioner is, for me personally, I have not been convinced that this is a public health necessity, considering the fact that even if I take the statistics of the opposing side, there's still close to 40% of the state population that isn't using fluoridated water. And there is close to 100 million people in the country that are not using it. 27% of the country, it was said 73, 27% is not, that's 100 million people. And for whatever reasons there are why communities that aren't doing it refuse to do it, and I can't speak for those communities, if it is such a health concern and it is guaranteed to reverse whatever concerns there are, then I'm always told no cost is too small. We have to do it for the benefit of our constituents. And I just am not convinced from what I've read, from what I've heard tonight, that if we were not to do this anymore, that there would be a tremendous problem with our city's dental health, considering the fact that there are neighbors of ours that do not do it for whatever reason. I just don't see it in a pandemic proportion or the news media is on top of it. Leominster is hurting their residents. They refuse to. I'm not seeing this banging of the drum that this is a critical matter we must reverse. I just find it to be one naturally occurring chemical in our water that is optional. It's not necessary. There are many tools in our tool chest to protect ourselves from cavities. And those who get cavities and don't go to the dentist and get them filled, they become root canals and bridges and then pulling the teeth. So that's where I come down on this. I will support this evening my own petition to cease the practice because while there is testimony given by one of the doctors about why the government keeps lowering the level, the fact remains is they keep lowering the level. And I did read some of those explanations of why they did that, about different populations, different climates, but they're still lowering it, which would tell me that there is a level of toxicity that they will acknowledge, no matter where you are in the country, is not acceptable. And I haven't seen the number go up. It's only gone down. This is my last question, I promise, to Ms. Spencer. Do you have anything to add about that dropping of the limit?
Yes, I do. It's not logical that if they had lower limits in places that were hot because they didn't have air conditioning and people were drinking more water, that they would now say, oh, now that we have air conditioning, we'll all have the lower limits. Because shouldn't it have gone the other way? So that was the illogical excuse, that justification, I should say, that HHS gave when they lowered the limits in April of 2015. But as I understand it, the suggestion to lower the limits had been made back in the 1990s, but the CDC and others in government had an advanced look at the Cochrane analysis, which was published in June of 2015. And I showed you very quickly that slide. The Cochrane analysis was a systematic review, the gold standard, and they showed that at these different levels, 0.7 and 1, there was significant amounts of dental fluorosis. They found no socioeconomic benefit and no benefit to adults, despite what was said. But there was significant amounts of dental fluorosis. So when they made the decision to lower it in April of 2015, then when the Cochrane report was republished in June of 2015, and they said, oh, yeah, but we've lowered it now, so there'll be less dental fluorosis because we've lowered it. But if you look at the Cochrane report, it still says that about 41% of the population will have some dental fluorosis on at least 2 of their teeth, and much of it will be in the back of the teeth, so you won't necessarily see it. But it does make the teeth more brittle. And 12% of the population will consider it unattractive and therefore spend money on cosmetic dentistry. Now, most of the dentists are ignorant of this material because it doesn't fit in the mythology. Some are willfully blind, but a few are dishonest, and they're promoting it. You have to consider that cosmetic dentistry and veneers, like Dr. Evans gave to his son, Chris Evans, the actor, are much more profitable for dentistry than filling a cavity. So, as I said, most of the dentists are ignorant of this. They're just taking the talking points, and others are willfully blind. But decay, as was mentioned, is a result of bacteria and poor diet and lack of dental care. And I have many graphs, and you can find them online, where countries that never fluoridated It went down. And they didn't have that fluoridated salt either. Many of us here are Italian. Italy never fluoridated, no fluoridated salt. The only place they had natural fluoride in Italy is on the slopes of volcanoes.
I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to jump in here a minute, well, more than a minute to be honest, but I apologize in advance. I have a whole page of notes from everything that's been said so far, and then more pages of research that I did at home, because, as I was discussing before the meeting with Ms. Spencer, I do my homework. I do rather extensive homework. So first, and I want to reiterate what Councillor DiNatale said, in that I thank everyone for having this discussion. Regardless of what side we come down on, it's good to have an open discussion, and I hope that at the end of the night, we can all continue to recognize that we're all here for the same reason. We might come to different conclusions, but we all want what's best for the city. And so, Councillor DiNatale, I think, raised some good questions in his discussion, some which he asked already, and I'm not going to go back to, obviously, but others which I came across in the research that I did. And I'd just like to kind of briefly address them and then work backwards into the presentation. As to the discrepancy or the seeming discrepancy between the EPA maximum of 4.0 parts per million versus the World Health Organization recommendation, it's kind of an apples to oranges, because the WHO's recommendation is a recommendation. If we compare that to the EPA's recommendation, that's 0.7. 4.0 is the EPA's enforceable limit. It's where they'll start fining you if you go above that. It's not the same as what they say is the optimal level. So that goes neither here nor there. It's a seeming discrepancy, but not an actual discrepancy. Ms. Spencer, I don't want to ask you to pull the slide up again because we've already switched back to the full camera view, but was I correct in seeing on your slide on the Cochrane study that the graph they produced had a note at the bottom that indicated something to the effect of 5 ppm or less?
Yes, they were looking, I believe, just up until the 4-point limits, which would be less than 5 parts. But I did want to make one small correction, Councillor. The EPA does not recommend fluoridation. The CDC recommends it. The EPA does not. They only set the contaminant level goals, and the contaminant level goal was 2.4 back in the 1980s, and they raised it to 4 parts per million over EPA scientists' objections, and there was amicus briefs and all kinds of things about that. So it went up for various reasons, but this is the FDA and the EPA play a game of hot potato. Nobody in the federal government.
I read that part in your included email. So I do understand, and thank you for the correction on that. My point was simply that the rest of the world does not have a limit that's much lower than ours. It just has a recommendation that's lower than our hard and fast cap. Then I did just want to clarify, and Dr. Mullenix, please feel free to raise your hand if I'm misrepresenting this. But because one of Councillor DiNatale's questions to you sort of crossed over with my area of expertise, I just wanted to note the question about what does it mean to be a certified expert witness. as near as I can tell, that would refer to having been allowed as an expert witness by a court under the Daubert test. Am I correct in that? You can unmute yourself.
Yes. I did go through the Daubert challenges in a couple of different states.
Okay, thank you. And is there anything, just so that I'm not misrepresenting anything, when you say you're a certified expert witness, is there more to it than having been allowed under the Daubert standard, or is that what you meant by including that?
Okay. I did not use the word certified. I'm kind of, not experienced with respect to the use of a certified. Either you're an expert witness that passed the Daubert challenge and went into a trial or not. And
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I understood. Thank you for confirming that for me. Let's see. So, as to the presence of arsenic in the fluorosilicic acid, that's, I believe it was stated that the maximum amount allowed in the acid is 50 parts per million. Commissioner DeLine, about how many gallons of acid go into, say, 1 million gallons of our water?
Well, it's simple. It's 0.7 parts per million, so 0.7 gallon would go into 1 million gallons.
So if there were, so by my calculations then, if there were 50 parts per million of arsenic in the acid, the amount that winds up in our water would be below the detectable threshold. Is that correct?
I can say that we are required to test for arsenic, and we've never detected arsenic in our water. So I would also add these impurities, and present in the hydrofluorosilic acid is also present in what we use for corrosion controls, soda ash and sodium bicarbonate. I mean, these things are taken from the earth. There's arsenic in the earth, and there's just no way to get these impurities out of there. And the measure is that we test the water for arsenic. And I've even discussed these whole things with Mass DEP, and we've never ever detected it at any level. It's been zero, non-detect every time. So it is in there. It is in our other chemicals because it is a naturally occurring element, and it is so diluted at that point. The benefits, outweigh the disadvantages to it. So, and there's just no way to get it out of there. So.
And could you also elaborate on the claim that was made that this fluorosilicic acid degrades our water infrastructure?
It is, because it is an acid, it is corrosive on the actual delivery mechanisms, the pumps and things like that, and they have to be, refurbished over time, as with all our chemicals. But as far as any impact on the water system, there isn't whatsoever on the water mains or anything like that. Our water, the only thing it would do is lower the pH of it, but our water is already acidic, because of all the, we don't have a good buffering capacity in our reservoirs, so we have to add sodium bicarb, basically baking soda, to raise the pH, and also soda ash to raise the alkalinity. And that goes hand in hand with reducing the corrosive effects of the water, so we don't leach lead from house plumbing systems. A lot of the house plumbing systems have lead in them, so the solder and so forth. But,
right. All right, thank you. I may have more questions as we go on, but
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to hold the floor for too long, so I'll leave some of this other stuff for after others have had their say. But I do just want to reassure members of the public, as a bona fide Italian, that if you do have more than trace amounts of your cooking water in your spaghetti by the time you're done, you've really overcooked it. Which I'm sorry, I'm trying to be funny. I'm not trying to mock or anything. I just mean seriously, anything that's in your water in a minute trace amount is not going to wind up in your spaghetti in any detectable quantity. It's not possible. I have Councillor Schultz first and then Councillor Squalia.
Yes, I was wondering, of course, I came in late, but I did ask Councilor Squalia if you had covered Deputy Commissioner Delane, anything about the history of Fitchburg and I mean, there was talk of there was one time that there was some operators that, got sick. How often has that happened? Has it really been an issue for the city of Fitchburg?
That particular incident, I mean, there was 3 personnel that had to go to the hospital as a precaution, similar to somebody would, in a car accident just to be checked out. They did get a little bit of the silly acid on their clothes, is my understanding, and it was removed immediately. So, but our actual delivery systems have a containment area, and they entered the containment area when the leak started. A valve broke off, and what they should have done is just let it leak. We did call the state and the fire department to let them know what was going on. And we
How long ago did that happen?
What was it?
2005.
2005. It was about 2005. There was no health impacts to those employees. There was no workman's comp claims or anything like that. But that's the only incident. We've trained our operators with to make sure that, whether it's that, I mean, we use chlorine gas, which is very toxic, and we have scrubber systems for things like that. And, if we have a leak, we allow the scrubber system to contain it. These facilities were designed for safety, first and foremost, in addition to treating the water. Inspected by DEP regularly. All the safety mechanisms are in there. And like I said, if there is a failure of even the whole tank of the acid, it would all be within that container area, and then we would hire, an outside company, so they have OSHA 40 training and all that type of training to come and remove that. So,
yeah. So that's and it's been decades we've had fluoride in our water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We've done a pretty good job
Yeah.
of.
You need to use the proper precautions, as with any chemical or any hazardous job, is to make sure that you don't expose yourself. And like I said, our facilities are set up so that our operators are not exposed, have all the proper safety equipment. So that's one thing I want to make sure that doesn't come out of this, that there's any way unsafe for our operators. I mean, as long as they follow proper safety protocols, there should not be an issue.
If you were to venture a guess, would you guess why Leominster has not implemented fluoride? I mean, is it the cost?
I honestly don't know their history. I'd hate to speak to it, so I would like to clarify that, when they approach us about purchasing water, I know I sent out an email before, is that they were looking at, their business manager from the water department had contacted me that they might have a potential large user come in to the city, a large water user, wish we could get that here, but so they were asking whether we would be able to supply water, and yes, and would it be fluoridated or not. So that didn't come to fruition in Leominster, so it wasn't a thing. I had talked to the Board of Health at that time about it, what would be the consideration. I didn't understand the whole procedure that the city
But this was an outside company that wanted to produce bottled water, is that what?
I'm not sure what they were going to use the water for in Leominster, but it was a large water user.
Yeah.
Presently, there's really no possibility of sale except for, some small area in Ashby. Nothing that would, and they understand that it's
Do you think
fluoride.
that if they did want to buy water at Leominster or any of the other communities, that if they really needed water, they would buy the fluoridated water?
I would think in an emergency, yes, they would,
I would think so, too.
Yeah. But at the same time, I would be before you immediately if I thought it would help our customers and alleviate, the rate, help them as far as revenue. I would be here, talk to the mayor and be here immediately and say, hey, we can, sell water here, there. This is the conditions that we need to meet. So that's not the case, but you would be one of the first to know besides the mayor.
I yield the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Councillor Squalia.
Thank you. I just have some clarifications on data. Like President Zarella, I love data. So While 62% of the communities in Massachusetts don't have access to fluoridated water, 57% of Massachusetts population, as of 2018, does drink fluoridated water. They have access to fluoridated water. So 43% of the population of Massachusetts actually doesn't have access to fluoridated water. That's per 2018 CDC fluoridation statistics of Massachusetts. And there hasn't been a change in the fluoridation status in Massachusetts since 2009. And according to the 2021 list of the Massachusetts city that by community water fluoridation status per mass.gov, there has been no city or town in Massachusetts that has removed fluoride. And in fact, 9 communities since 2020 have added fluoride to their community water supply. Fitchburg started fluoridation in 1975. Like President Zarella said, the 4.0 limit, I was going to mention that, so I appreciate that you did. However, the limit for the Food and Drug Administration is 2.4 milligrams per liter. And if you were to buy bottled water from a company that does not add fluoridated water, the limit of that bottled water that's for naturally allowed fluoride is actually 2.4 milligrams per liter. Supposedly, according to what I've read, most bottled waters do not have high levels of fluoride, but per the FDA, they are allowed to have that as a maximum level. And additionally, I heard statements of they keep lowering the level. But in 1962, it was the United States Public Health Service that recommended public water supply contain between 0.7 and 1.2 milligrams per liter of fluoride. I don't see that that has changed at all, except in 2015, where they recommended that it straight up is the lower level of 0.7, and Dr. Alukian was correct in noting that it was based on fluoride concentrations based on outdoor air temperature of geographic areas. This is per the Health and Human Service Public Health Recommendation Summary. And for supplementary information, they also say the recommendation was because of new data that addressed changes in the presence of dental fluorosis, the relationship between water intake and outdoor temperature in children, and the contribution of fluoride in drinking water to total fluoride exposure. So that would suggest the increase in the prevalence of fluoride toothpaste or fluoride in foods or what have you. That is all I have to add right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Van Hazinga.
Thank you very much, President. We heard a long presentation from Mrs. Spencer, and I just wanted to ask, we heard from Dr. Lukian a bit, and we had Dr. Fisher at the beginning of the meeting. I just wanted to know if either of them had any topics that were brought up in the presentation that they'd like to address that they think might be confused or incorrect or need clarification.
Yeah, I'd be happy to say a few things.
I would like to say some things also when he's finished.
All right, let's do one at a time, and we'll start with Dr. Alukian since he jumped in first, and then we'll go to Dr. Fisher.
And I just asked, we've been here a long time, if you could just keep it brief and hit the high points, that would be great.
I'll keep it brief. They keep bringing up that the fluoridation affects IQ. Those studies have been repudiated. They were poorly done. Many of them were done in China or India. They were not peer-reviewed journals. They've been heavily criticized. There are only 2 countries in the world that are 100% fluoridated. Singapore and Hong Kong. And Singapore and Hong Kong consistently are either 1, 2, or 3 in the highest IQ in the world. So I just want you to know that one because they keep bringing up IQ in fluoridation.
All right, thank you.
I'll let Dr. Fisher take the rest of my time.
All right. Dr. Fisher, you can go ahead.
All right. Well, the one thing I wanted to address was the National Toxicology report. They seem to indicate that, in fact, they do not favor fluoride in the water. and they talked about a lawsuit to our Freedom of Information Act, I think it was, to get information relative to the National Toxicology Report. But anyway, it's good to know what the National Toxicology Program is. It develops and applies tools of modern toxicology and molecular biology to identify substances in the environment that may affect human health. And the difficulty with it, they talked about the draft report, and that's what it was. It was a draft report in 2020. May of 2020 was a draft report, and they talked about the inverse relationship of fluoride and IQ. And basically, as fluoride went up, IQ went down. But that was in the draft report in 2020. March of 2022, they came up with a second draft after it was peer-reviewed by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and they concluded that fluoride should not be classified as a cognitive neurodevelopmental hazard for humans. So, that was one part. The other thing I sort of hated is they talk about toxic waste, that fluoride is toxic waste from the phosphate manufacturing industry. I should mention phosphoric acid, which is in most of your soda drinks like Coke, Pepsi, whatever. Phosphoric acid is a byproduct, and that's what fluoride as a product is, a byproduct, not a waste product from the fluoride manufacturing industry. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to see what other notes I have, but I think the others are pretty much. But as far as fluoride in the water, I have been on a mobile access to care van in fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities, and I will tell you, in non-fluoridated communities, when I was doing free dental care for poor kids, literally they had permanent first molars rotted down into the gum. So my experience has been in fluoridated, non-fluoridated communities on a mobile access to care van, and fluoride makes decay manageable. So in a dental office, you'll see kids in fluoridated communities that come in with relatively little decay, but they still a lot of times do have decay. But in non-fluoridated communities, to me, some of the decay that you see, especially in poor children who do not have, poor children that I saw in the mobile access to care van, you do not see that in a dental office because they're not able to afford to go to a dentist. And I just, over 50 years of practice, I've just seen the decimations of rampant decay in children, and I just think it's a terrible thing. And I continue to support fluoride in the water for those children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. So I did a lot of research and a lot of reading prior to this meeting, and I typed up a page of notes, and most of what I had to talk about has already been discussed. We've been here a long time. I don't want to belabor the point. But just to hit the high points, that fluoride is naturally found everywhere. It's in the rocks, it's in the soil, it's in all of our water. In the U.S., it ranges from 0.1 to 12 parts per million. But in most areas, it's about 0.2 parts per million, so it's less than is needed to ensure dental health. So what we do is we fortify our water in something that everybody consumes. And this is similar to like we fortify salt with iodine, we fortify milk with vitamin D, orange juice with calcium, and bread with folic acid. These are all vitamins and nutrients that we need to be healthy that we don't get enough in our normal diet.
All right, please, no comments from the audience.
So we put them in things that we do consume regularly. This is a regular practice that we've done for decades. And fluoride is beneficial in small amounts, but like lots of things, like ice cream in large amounts, it's not good for you. And this is similar to all these substances as well. Too much iron is bad for you. Too much salt is bad for you. Too much vitamin D is toxic, but these are still things that you need. So that we have safeguards in place in our water system to ensure that we get the proper amount that we need and we don't get too much. And as was mentioned, it is physically impossible to consume enough fluoridated water to kill you. At 0.7 parts per million, you need to consume 1,900 cups of water in one sitting. And I think just consuming that much water would kill you far before the fluoride would. I was mentioned that fluoride was characterized as a industrial byproduct. As Dr. Fisher just mentioned, it is extracted from phosphate rock. That's because it comes in the soil and the rocks, and that's an easy way to get it. And then after it's extracted, the rock is used to make fertilizer. It's not going to be wasted. Another substance that's extracted from phosphate rock is phosphoric acid, which is an ingredient in Coca-Cola. My counsel here is a bottle of Coca-Cola. This has a byproduct of phosphate rock in it, and many other sodas do too. So the best available scientific evidence has consistently shown that fluoridation is safe and effective, and remarkably effective in reducing cavities in children and adults, even with the rise in fluoride, availability of fluoride from other sources, like rinses, toothpaste, supplements. It's also an incredibly cost-efficient way to prevent tooth decay to fluoridate the community's water system. The lifetime cost of water fluoridation per person is less than the cost of one dental filling. That when you compare it to other costs in our society, it's peanuts. This is a great deal of gain for very little cost. There are often many studies that are cited that show that water fluoridation is harmful or is bad, and there are a lot of problems with those studies. They're consistently shown to be biased, have problems with sample size, have problems with technique, and one thing that keeps being raised is the idea that fluoride reduces IQ in children. And often it's one study that was done in Canada that is pointed to as proving this. And I went and looked up some evaluations of this study that was done in England by professional researchers who didn't research whether or not this is the case, but just looked at the study and how it was designed. And there's a lot of talk about problems with subgroups analysis, uncontrolled co-founders, problems with the p-values being below, and it's higher, but I'll read some of the high points. One professor says, first, the claim that maternal fluoride exposure is associated with decrease in IQ is false. Another one, I have a range of concerns about this paper. It is not supported by the data. There are numerous other complicating factors that limit the interpretability of the results. Any conclusions must be interpreted with caution. And this is a good one that sums up. So I think there are far too many questions to be answered before pregnant women should feel they must reduce their fluoride intake, or public health authorities should change their advice or policies. So we do not have good science that says this is a problem. There's a lot of bad science that says this might be a problem. And I don't think that's a reason to abandon the benefits that we have. Because this is community water fluoridation is a great benefit. It's been in place for 75 years. About 3 out of 4 people in this country have access to fluoridated water. And it was named one of the 10 greatest public health achievements of the 20th century by the CDC. This has done a lot of good. And I want to address a couple questions that were raised by a fellow counselor. And one of them was, what about other communities who don't fluoridate their water? And why should we if other communities don't? I can tell you it would be beneficial to me to go to the gym. I'm a big guy, I'm overweight, my family has a history of heart trouble. I would be well served by going to the gym. But if my neighbors don't go to the gym, that doesn't mean it's not going to be beneficial to me. I should go to the gym because it's beneficial to me, not what my neighbors do. That is immaterial. And the big question that we have to think about tonight is, why do we do it? Why do we fluoridate our water? And my fellow counselor answered that question himself right afterwards. He said, to improve the dental health of our community. And that's what it does. And I have not seen any persuasive evidence that we should abandon this benefit. I just don't see why. It is a great benefit that has been proven to work, and we should continue to do it. So that's my feeling. Thank you.
Councillor Fleming.
Thank you. I came in here planning to vote a certain way. I have never thought anything about this subject before until it came to us. So you can go through all the research and find anything on either side of this, on these studies. So I just have a couple of questions. Without the fluoride, I mean, I keep hearing that, yes, the fluoride does make the cavity smaller. Is that a fact, or will just brushing and mouthwash and just doing normal hygiene, diet, take care of those issues?
Who would you like to answer that, Counselor?
We'll start.
Thank you, Counselor. You know, we're making this all about teeth. And when it comes down to teeth, the best available recent modern studies using the NHANES data, which is National Health Survey examinations conducted by CDC, excuse me, and I believe FDA, found that the best I can say is that maybe there's a fraction of a cavity less. One study that I read in the 1980s of Kingston and Newburgh in New York was going to prove, that the fluoride was going to be helping. And they looked at 1,500 kids in these two communities. In the fifth graders, no difference in any social and economic status. No difference in the fourth graders, the third graders, the second graders. But in the first graders, in the lowest socioeconomic status, in the fluoridated town, they had an average of 1.5 cavities. In the non-fluoridated town, they had an average of 2 cavities. So what was the headline? Reduces cavities by 25%. There are lots of studies like that are very, very, very misleading. The most recent study out of England, the catfish study, again, these dentists totally believed it was doing benefit. They saw it in their own practices. And then when they looked at the data, it was 0.2% of a single cavity, I believe, in the primary teeth, and 0.3 in the permanent teeth, or vice versa. It is inconsequential. A huge study done in late 1980s of 39,000 American children found, when you looked at all the data, there was no significant difference between fluoridated and non-fluoridated town. Minuscule. However, to try to prove the case, there was some data cherry picking going on. Oh, they just looked at these towns compared to that town, so we could turn it around. And as far as, you see these studies are bad, and there's one study in Canada or whatever, the MIREX studies out of Canada were the same studies used for all environmental toxins, including lead and everything else. There's a series of studies. And although some dentists will write letters repudiating them, the neurotoxicologists at the National Toxicology Program found differently, and was talking about drafts and versus the final version. This was going to press within a couple of days when it was pulled. And the final version, they took out the hazard determination, and they said, well, we'll just make a meta-analysis and a report. And they came to the same conclusion, but while using those inflammatory language of hazard determination. And what it comes down to is it is not about teeth. You want to fix a tooth, fix a tooth. But if you have arthritis or irritable bowel syndrome or inflamed bladders, they found...
Ms. Spencer.
I'm sorry, I'm testifying rather than answering the questions. Yes, it's minimal.
Everyone's been doing it, I understand.
I could go on for quite a while.
So I guess where I'm going with this...
to that question as well?
I'm sorry, please, no jumping in. Okay. Councillor Fleming, would you like to ask that question of anyone else? All right, Dr. Fisher, go ahead. Or Dr. Lukian, whoever it was just speaking.
Or Dr. Mullenix.
I don't know. Are you recognizing me? This is Dr. Lukian.
I'll let Dr. Lukian answer.
Whichever.
I'm sorry. In terms of cost-benefit ratio, the average cost-benefit ratio for fluoridation is you put $1 into fluoridation, you get $20 back in better oral health. That's the payout. There is a range, and the range depends on how many inlets there are into the system and what the population is. For example, for Greater Boston, there are only 2 inlets, 2.5 million people. So our cost-benefit ratio is much better than a small community that may have 5 inlets. But the average is roughly 1 to 20. You spend $1 for fluoridation, you get $20 for the bin. And we recently did a study in Rhode Island matching fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities, looking at the cost for Medicaid services. And we found that it cost $100 more in the non-fluoridated community versus the fluoridated community. So there's lots of data there that shows there is a substantial benefit. It may be only 25% less tooth decay, but that's less, that prevents the number of cavities. Then the size of the cavity is much less. And you also have more children who are caries-free. They don't have tooth decay at all. Those things usually aren't mentioned in these discussions, but those are the facts as well.
Thank you. So I guess where I'm going with this is I think where there are so many studies that you just take a side. This becomes a side issue because the facts, you can weigh them in on either side. I have 2 kids. I have well water. My kids brush their teeth. I went in and re-brushed their teeth, made sure they took care of their dental care. They never had cavities. Do they have cavities now? I don't know. But they didn't when I was raising them. My mother and her family, my mother was born in Italy and lived through the war. The Germans took over their home. And I remember her telling us stories that because she never brushed her teeth, and she died with all her own teeth. And my father, although born here, has his own teeth as well. I believe there's a lot of hereditary factors that go into people's dental care. So my mother used to just take a face cloth and brush one tooth at a time, and she didn't use toothpaste, didn't use anything. So in your own family, you look at people, everybody's got the same genetics. Why do some people have good teeth? Why do some people have bad teeth? Probably because the people with the good teeth and the nicer teeth are taking better care of their teeth. I guess I'm going with where Councilor Di Natale went with this. Is it really necessary? Because we're getting fluoride in foods, we're getting it in things we drink, we're getting it. Is this really an added benefit? And that, I guess I just want to end it there.
Yeah.
And nobody can convince me one way or another.
Please, no jumping in.
Okay.
Councilor Kuchar.
Thank you. When I came here this evening, I've done a lot of research, like I think every counselor here has done. And, when you start talking about, using the fluoride in the water, the amount of fluoride that we use is not, a danger to people. I don't believe that amount of fluoride is dangerous. Now, one thing that Dr. Cronin did say, and I picked up on it immediately, during the last part of his writing here, says public works must be diligent in their handling of fluoride, and if so, our success will continue in Fitchburg. And it has been testified here in this hearing today that, yes, if too much fluoride is a bad thing. And I agree with Councilor Van Hassingen when he says, yeah, too much of anything is a bad thing. And then, much like Councilor Di Natale and Councilor Fleming, I worked, strike what I just said about the councilors at this point in time, but the gentleman from the wastewater treatment plant, people are always wondering, well, what are they putting in our waters? What are they doing? I used to work in a wastewater treatment plant when I was in college, so when you were saying that there are precautions that are had to protect the employees, I completely understand where you're coming from, because I used to work in that. But I then start thinking, like Councilor Di Natale and Councilor Fleming, is it really necessary? Well, I grew up in one of those towns that did not have fluoride. And I remember it was, I believe, once a week, if my memory serves me correctly. Of course, we're talking about the early 80s. But we were marched down to the cafeteria, and we were given these little cups filled with this greenish liquid. It tasted like spearmint. And, we basically
put it in our mouth, swished it around for, a few minutes and spit it back into the cup, and we went back to class. So it is possible to get by without it. It's not a necessity. Now, I completely respect what the dentists who testified here today. I completely respect what their opinion is. But growing up in a town which did not fluoridate their water, I now know that, yeah, you can get by without it. Fluoride is everywhere. Toothpaste, you can get mouthwash, you can, you get it in food, you can get supplements, you can, whatever you need to do, you can do. So yeah, technically, I don't think we do need it. And it is, according to, I failed to look into lawsuits about excess fluoridation during my research, but now seeing that, yeah, accidents can happen, and working in a wastewater treatment plant, yeah, pumps fail, valves fail. Could it happen? Yeah, it could. Is it a risk that we should take? Considering the benefit and the alternatives, I don't think it's a risk we should take. I yield the floor.
Councillor Brochman.
I'm not going to go through all this paperwork and stuff. I'm going to tell you about myself. I'm a product of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'm a product coming from a large family and being poor. They couldn't go to a dentist. We didn't have fluoride. I'm that guy that Dr. Crowley talked about that has no teeth today. Because of that reason, I believe. My teeth were very, very soft. Very soft. Let me also tell you, my kid, 36 years old, has one cavity. One cavity. One. He just got that last year. The dentist can't believe it. But he brushes his teeth and he rinses his mouth with the city water. And he takes good care of it. My granddaughter, her mother tells her when she goes to the ladies' room or bathroom, or whatever way you want to say it, make sure you brush your teeth. She'll come over our house because we're babysitting. Pepe says, did you brush your teeth? Come over here. And I smell. And she didn't. So I send her in our bathroom, and she comes out, and I make her smell. And I says, not good enough. Go back and redo it over again. And she has to brush her teeth again. And so I make them brush their teeth. As for the poor people, when I was growing up and my kids were growing up and I was working, I never made a lot of money. Never made a lot of money. I wasn't making six figures. I was lucky to make $30,000. I was raising a family. I brought my kids to the dentist. When the bill got too high, you know what the dentist told me? Pay your bill and you can come back. That's what they said. And when I paid the bill, we went back. The dentist says we need $2,000 for to straighten out your teeth. They didn't have the money because I still owed him money. And we paid it down, my kids went back. Kids of the poorest people do not have the financial needs to go and buy different things. I know I sold ice cream in the city, and I've been to every neighborhood in this city. And I know what I'm talking about when I say it because I did it, and I saw it. And a lot of kids can't afford it, and the parents can't afford to send their kids to the dentist every 6 months. I know I get dental insurance, and I don't use it for my wife, and now my wife is going to pay part of the cleaning, and I get dental insurance. And it costs me $80 a month. And that's what I have to pay. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I get excited. And I'm telling you the truth. And I'm telling you, all this stuff is interesting. I read your things, and I read about that thing where it makes this correlation. But I also read the kids at a young age, when they take that toothpaste and they put it on that stick and they eat it, they swallow it. So that causes some of it. And one thing I read, one dentist, I believe one dentist says put a little dab on your toothbrush and brush that way. Don't put the whole thing loaded. So I did do my homework, and that probably is as good as these things, because some of this stuff, like that guy said on there, that thing, it's over my head. I'm not an expert on it. I just know that I'm a product of the 50s, a product of the 60s, and I'll tell you honestly, you can all look at me, it's embarrassing when you're talking and your teeth fall down. It's embarrassing if you got no teeth when you're out there, and it makes a big difference in a person's life, a big difference in a person's life. That's up to the chair. That's not up to me. But it does make a big difference in a person's life when they don't have teeth. And it changes their whole complexions. Say what you want to say. It makes you feel different about yourself. And when you have your teeth, you feel like a person. You feel like a human being. But when you don't have your teeth, you feel like you're low. And you know what I was going to do tonight, because I told my fellow counselors, but they asked me not to do it. I was going to pull out my teeth and show you. But they asked me not to. But, you know, I'm just telling you, I'm going to support it because I think it's very good for the kids. But let me also point out to you, because I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, I don't know what exactly one year, we had a water crisis in the whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Matter of fact, Leominster was very dry at No Town Reservoir. And I remember driving up Route 2 and they had pipes coming from the Quabbin into there. And if I'm not mistaken, their water was fluoridated going into there. So it's not like they didn't take it, they took it. You know, I try to get information from Leominster, but the Board of Health says, ask the water department. If I called the water department at 3 o'clock, everybody was gone home. So, but only in government do you see that. But anyway.
I'm sure they're there earlier in the morning than we usually are too, though.
But anyway, I'm going to tell you honestly, to be honest with you, I know you did a lot of work. I know you did a lot of work, and a lot of people are here. But I'm telling you how it is with me, how I feel, and my kids. And I see my kids, and I'm proud of my kids having real good teeth. I'm proud of my grandkids going to the dentist and having good teeth. But those are the kids that can really afford it, and they can afford to go to the dentist every 6 months to have their teeth pressed. Not everybody can afford it. Not everybody has that luxury. And not everybody makes 6 figures. There are the people that make the 20, the 30, and the 40,000. And when you're raising a family and you got bills to pay, that counts. And I'm tight. And I wanted my kids not to have what I have. And I'm not afraid to have to say it because I'm embarrassed. And I tell them all the time. To this day, I tell them. I even tell my grandkids.
Counselor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I yield the floor. You heard my enough.
Councillor Fleming.
Yeah. I just have to respond to something Councillor Boishman just said. Many years back, I don't believe dental care was something that people were doing. I know a lot of people in their 70s and their 80s who do have dentures and have had them since they were young, in their 40s. And I'm one of 6 kids, so we didn't have money. My father was just a teacher. You know, we didn't have a ton of money, and we went to the dentist maybe once a year. But they made sure we brushed at home. We all had cavities. I believe part of the issue is hereditary. If you just, I know, like I said, look at your own family. Some people have teeth, some people don't. It's all how they take care of their teeth. I don't believe it's the fluoride that would have kept your teeth in your mouth.
I'll never know.
So.
No back and forth, please.
Yes.
To what you're saying, it's different.
Councillor Kuchar.
Thank you. Just as one comment as to my colleague's statement. You know, although I respect what he said, and you know, my parents didn't have dental insurance great dental insurance, I would say, growing up, and all it covered was a cleaning. But nowadays, we have Mass Health, and the people that are on Mass Health can get their dental work done. So. I understand what you went through growing up and what your kids went through when they're growing up, but there's state insurance for that now, and it's covered. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Cregan.
So we've heard from some real experts tonight. I'd like to thank Dr. Alukian, a fellow Armenian, I'm going to presume, for all of his work. I spent time looking at what he's done, and it's just amazing. I mean, we are lucky to have an expert of that level of expertise here. It's not one side or the other side. It's a lot of experts in history against anecdotes, surmisal, assertions, and personal experience. I'm a journalist. I totally value personal experience. I have done hundreds, thousands of interviews with people to get their personal experience. But I also studied a science in school, and I was taught to go to the library and go read expert testimony. And I heard that from Dr. Alukian, and I heard that from Dr. Fisher, and I heard that from my friend, Dr. Joe Cronin, and I heard that from my friend, Dr. John Bogdasarian. You guys are experts. You guys are in the field. And I can tell you that I have had conversations at Community Health Connections. One of the issues we have is not, we have available dental health for our kids, hooray. But we also have a lot of kids that don't come from families that are organized enough to get them to the dentist. I've had conversations with dentists up on Burbank and down at John Fitch. The reality is, a lot of kids that should go don't. If we take fluoride away from those kids, we are sentencing them. And I'm going to use that dramatic word. They will not have fluoride in their water, probably won't make a difference in a few months, but Brockton was very concerned when their fluoride was cut off for 3 months because of supply issues. I have seen enough children, and I work in the schools a lot. I volunteer 2 days a week. I'm with all kinds of kids, and these kids are awesome. And some of them are foster kids, and some of them come from families where the parents probably couldn't afford a $7 bottle of mouthwash. Maybe they couldn't afford a brush. And the dentists up at Community Health Connections, and I'm sure that Dr. Bogdasarian can confirm this, you know, there's a lot of canceled appointments that happen. There's a lot of kids that don't make it up there. And Dr. Alukian's words, in non-fluoridated communities, poor kids have molars rotting down to the gums. Did you hear that, my colleagues, my dear friends? Did you hear that? Molars rotting down to the gums. It's a shame. Some of the decay you do not see in a dental office. Right. Middle-class kids get to go to a dental office. Poor kids, of whom in Fitchburg more than 500 are homeless, probably don't get to go to a dental office. I'm going to move the question right now. I'm going to move this question because I am not going to put the children I see in Fitchburg Public Schools or their parents who may be watching, you know, at any kind of risk.
So you'll need to make the motion first before you
I will
can
do
move the
that.
question.
I would like to move this question now.
Just a second. So to be clear, we don't have a motion in front of us to move the question on, so you'll want to first make a main motion,
Sure.
which I imagine is probably, given your statement, a motion to give leave to withdraw?
Yes, I would like to give a motion, leave to withdraw.
Second.
All right, and then you are moving the question. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and second to move the question. That requires a 2/3 vote of the council without debate. Madam Clerk?
President Zarella.
Yes.
Councilor Boschman.
Yes.
Councilor Kuchar.
Yes.
Councilor Cragen.
Yes.
Councilor Cruz.
Yes.
Councilor Di Natale.
No.
Councilor Fleming.
No.
Forget about your constituents. What about our voices?
We just moved the question.
Councilor Schultz.
Yes.
Councilor Squalia.
Aye.
Councilor Van Hazinger.
Yes.
8-2. 8 yes, 2 no.
And I'm bad at math. That is higher than 2/3, though. Correct?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
We're not done yet. That was just to move the question. Yes,
Not
so
that
we
we
have 10 present. No, actually, we have a full 11 now. No, 10. Okay, so yes, that is a 2/3 majority, so we now proceed directly to a vote on the main motion. This is a motion, again, to restate the motion. This is a motion to give leave to withdraw, so a vote of aye will withdraw the petition to ask the state to rescind fluoridation. A vote of nay will be a vote to maintain the motion before us. Maintain the petition before us, rather.
Say this over again.
Basically, if you're in favor of keeping fluoride, vote yes.
Okay.
If you're in favor of removing fluoride, vote no.
Okay.
If any counselor objects to my restatement of that in those terms, please speak up now. But, all right, in that case, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Happy to. President Zarella.
Yes.
Counselor Boishman.
Yes.
Counselor Kuchar.
No.
Counselor Cragan.
Yes.
Counselor Cruz.
Yes.
Counselor Di Natale.
No.
Counselor Fleming.
No.
Counselor Green is not here, sorry. Counselor Schultz.
Yes.
Counselor Squalia.
Aye.
Counselor Van Herzinger.
Yes.
So we have 7-3.
All right, the petition is given leave to withdraw. And that concludes our business for the evening.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. There being no objection, we stand adjourned.